The sword that chose no one. The blade of Zithar had been waiting for centuries. Deep inside an ancient temple on the distant planet of Fourth 7, the legendary sword rested on a stone pedestal, untouched and unmoving. The old text said that only the worthy could wield it, but no one had ever been chosen. The Galactic Empire had tried everything. They sent their strongest warriors, their most skilled champions. Some had trained for decades, mastering the art of combat. Others had minds sharper than any strategist in the universe. Yet when they reached for the sword, the blade remained still. It did not move, did not glow, did not acknowledge their presence. The failure was an insult to the Empire's pride. Now, General Xylar, a ruthless warrior from the reptilian Drakfor species, stood before the sword. His scales gleamed under the dim temple lights, his red eyes burning with fury. He had conquered 100 worlds. He had crushed entire rebellions. He was stronger than any human, faster than any machine. If anyone was worthy, it was him. He stepped forward, raising his clawed hand, gripping the handle of the sword. Nothing happened. The sword was cold. It refused him, just as it had refused everyone before him. Xylar's growl echoed through the chamber. He gritted his teeth and tried harder, veins bulging in his arm. Still, the sword did not move. The temple walls remained silent, as if mocking him. Furious, Xylar ripped his hand away, turning to the other warriors. "This is a useless relic. We waste our time here." He raised his fist. "Destroy the temple. Let this blade be buried in the ruins." The warriors saluted, stepping back to set explosives along the temple walls. Among them was a human. His name was Ethan Carter, an archaeologist, not a soldier. He wasn't here for war. He was part of a research team, sent to study the history of Zithar civilization. Unlike the warriors, he didn't care about the sword's power. He only wanted to understand why it rejected everyone. Now, as he watched the Empire prepare to erase history, his heart sank. "This is wrong," Ethan whispered to himself. No one heard him. No one cared. The first detonator was activated. A countdown started, 1 minute until destruction. Ethan acted without thinking. He dashed forward, pushing past the soldiers. "Wait," he shouted. "Just let me take a look before you destroy it." Xylar barely spared him a glance. "Foolish human. Step away." Ethan didn't listen. He reached the pedestal, staring at the blade. It was beautiful, covered in strange golden markings, its surface smooth like liquid metal. It didn't look like an ordinary sword. 30 seconds until explosion. Ethan lifted his hand, and without thinking, he touched the sword. A deep humming sound filled the chamber. The ground shook. The temple's walls glowed with ancient symbols. The sword was alive. Ethan gasped as a surge of energy ran through his body. His mind filled with visions, a forgotten war, a lost civilization, a blade created for a purpose greater than any empire. The warriors stumbled back in shock. "The sword, it's reacting." One of them shouted. General Xylar's eyes widened. Impossible. Ethan felt the sword move in his hand. The weight of it was perfect, as if it was made for him. The golden markings flashed brighter, wrapping around his arm like living light. Then, boom! The first explosion triggered. The temple started to collapse. Stones rained down, cracks spreading across the floor. Xylar snarled, pointing at Ethan. "Seize him. Take the sword." Ethan's heart pounded. He had no idea how to fight. He had never held a weapon in his life. But the sword, it knew. As the first soldier lunged at him, Ethan's arm moved on its own. The blade swung in a perfect arc, blocking the attack without effort. Another warrior rushed at him. Ethan dodged, not by skill, but by instinct. The sword was guiding him. The Empire's soldiers hesitated. Fear flickered in their eyes. The human was chosen. Xylar clenched his fists. "Fall back," he roared. "Let the temple bury them." The soldiers ran, leaving Ethan behind. The temple was crumbling fast. Dust filled the air. Ethan had seconds to escape. He turned, sprinting toward the exit, the sword still glowing in his hand. As he reached the doorway, he heard a whisper, not from the temple, not from the soldiers, but from the sword itself. "You were always worthy." Ethan gasped, but there was no time to think. He jumped through the collapsing ruins, and the temple fell behind him, burying centuries of history. When the dust settled, Ethan lay on the ground, breathing hard. The blade of Zithar was still in his grasp. The sword had chosen, and it had chosen a human, the human who defied destiny. Ethan Carter lay in the dust, his breath ragged, his fingers still curled tightly around the hilt of the blade of Zithar. The temple was gone, collapsed into a pile of ancient rubble. He could still hear the echoes of stone falling, but beneath that sound was something else. A hum. The sword was alive, its surface glowing softly, as if it had a mind of its own. It had chosen him, a human. And now, the entire galactic empire would come for him. He pushed himself up, coughing from the dust, his heart still hammering. The Empire's soldiers had fled when the temple collapsed, but they wouldn't stay gone for long. General Xylar would not accept failure. He would return, and he would come with everything he had. Ethan needed to move. But as he took his first step, something changed. His vision blurred, the world around him shifted, and suddenly he was somewhere else, a vision of the past. Ethan stood in the middle of a battlefield. The sky above him was dark, torn apart by flashes of energy weapons and fire. Strange, alien warriors clashed in combat, their armor shattered, their weapons broken. The air smelled of burnt metal and blood. In the center of the chaos stood a lone warrior, tall, cloaked in flowing golden robes, the blade of Zithar glowing in their hands. Ethan couldn't see their face, but he could feel their desperation, their sorrow. They were the last of their kind. They raised the sword high, shouting something in a language Ethan didn't understand. But the meaning burned into his mind. The sword must never fall into darkness. The vision shifted. The battlefield vanished, replaced by the ruins of the temple he had just escaped. The warrior was gone. The sword, now resting on its pedestal, was alone, waiting for someone worthy. And then the whisper returned. "Find the lost warrior of Zithar." Return to reality. Ethan's body jolted as he was ripped back to the present. He gasped, stumbling forward, his head spinning. The vision faded, but the words remained. Find the lost warrior. But who were they? Hadn't the Zitharians been wiped out centuries ago? Before he could think further, the sound of heavy boots echoed through the jungle ruins. The Empire was back. Ethan ducked behind a fallen slab of stone, just as a squad of black-armored soldiers marched into the wreckage of the temple. Their rifles were drawn, their eyes scanning for survivors. At the front of the group stood General Xylar, his reptilian face twisted with fury. His red eyes scanned the rubble. "He is not dead," Tyler growled. His claws curled into a fist. "Find him. Bring me the sword." Ethan's heart pounded. He couldn't fight them. There were too many. The sword had helped him survive before, but he didn't even know how to use it. He needed a plan. Slowly, he crouched lower, moving silently between the broken ruins. If he could reach the jungle, he might have a chance to escape. But just as he took another step, his foot slipped on loose gravel. The small sound was barely noticeable, but it was enough. "Over there," a soldier shouted. Ethan ran. Blaster fire erupted behind him, red bolts slicing through the air. He zigzagged through the ruins, diving over broken walls, forcing his legs to move faster than ever before. The jungle was just ahead. If he could make it, he had a chance. But before he reached the tree line, something slammed into him from behind. A force like a truck sent him sprawling to the ground. The sword slipped from his grip, skidding across the dirt. He groaned, rolling onto his back, only to find General Xylar standing over him. The Drakvar warrior's clawed foot pressed down on his chest, pinning him in place, his reptilian face twisted into a cruel smile. "You are no warrior, human," Sylar sneered. The sword made a mistake. He reached down, grabbing the blade of Zithar from the ground. The moment his fingers touched the hilt, the sword screamed. A blinding shockwave of energy exploded from the blade, knocking Sylar back. The general snarled in pain as his body convulsed, his armor sparking. The sword rejected him again, but this time it was stronger, almost as if it was angry. Ethan gasped, crawling toward the weapon. It was calling to him. With one desperate lunge, he grabbed the sword, and the world exploded into light. The escape. When the light faded, Ethan found himself somewhere new. He wasn't in the ruins anymore. He wasn't even on the planet. He was inside a starship. The walls were sleek, metallic, the air filled with the hum of an active engine. A glowing holographic map flickered in front of him. Ethan spun around, confused. How did he get here? Before he could think, a sharp voice spoke behind him. "I wasn't expecting a human." Ethan whirled around, gripping the sword tightly. A figure stepped out of the shadows. A woman, tall and powerful, dressed in dark armor. Her skin was deep blue, her silver eyes glowing in the dim light. Ethan recognized her species immediately. A Zitharian. But that was impossible. The Zitharians were extinct. She studied him for a long moment, her gaze shifting to the blade of Zithar in his hand. Then she smirked. "If the sword chose you, then we're in more trouble than I thought." Ethan's mind raced. Who was she? How was she still alive? And more importantly, what did the sword know that he didn't? Hunted across the stars. The air inside the starship was tense and cold. Ethan Carter gripped the blade of Zithar, his breath unsteady. Across from him stood the mysterious Zitharian woman, her silver eyes glowing in the dim light. This was impossible. The Zitharians were extinct, wiped out centuries ago. Yet here she was, standing in front of him, completely alive. She crossed her arms, studying him. "You look confused, human." Ethan swallowed hard. "You're Zitharian." The woman smirked. "Perceptive. But you're the real mystery here." She stepped closer, her gaze dropping to the sword in his hands. "That blade hasn't responded to anyone in centuries. And now it chooses you. A human." She scoffed. "We're doomed." Ethan scowled. "Gee, thanks." The woman ignored his sarcasm. "The question is, why?" That was the same question Ethan had been asking himself since the moment he touched the sword. He shook his head. "I don't know. I never wanted this. I'm not a warrior. I'm an archaeologist." Then the sword made a mistake. Ethan had heard those words before, from General Sylar, just before the blade blasted him with energy and rejected him. But deep down, Ethan knew. The sword had chosen him for a reason. Before he could respond, the ship's alarm blared. A cold, mechanical voice rang through the speakers. "Warning. Incoming transmission. Imperial fleet detected. High-risk threat level." Ethan felt his stomach drop. "They found us." The woman's expression darkened. "Of course they did. You made quite the mess back on Vorith 7. She turned and snapped her fingers. The starship's control panel came to life, flickering with holographic screens and a rotating 3D image of the galaxy. Ethan barely had time to process it all before a massive fleet of Imperial warships appeared on the display. There were dozens of them, sleek black ships with the Empire's red insignia, moving like silent predators in the void. They had locked onto the Zitharian ship, and they were closing in fast. Ethan's pulse spiked. "You have a plan, right?" The woman shot him a sharp look. "We run." She slammed her fist against the control panel. The ship rumbled beneath them, engines roaring to life. Outside, the endless black of space shifted as the ship banked hard, dodging the first wave of blaster fire. Boom! An explosion rocked the hull. Sparks rained from the ceiling. Ethan barely kept his balance. "Are you sure this is running?" "Because it feels like dying." The woman ignored him, gripping the controls. "Hold on, human." She pressed a sequence of buttons, and the stars outside blurred. The ship entered hyperspace, vanishing just as another missile streaked toward them. For a moment, everything was silent. Ethan let out a long breath, collapsing into the nearest seat. His heart still hammered. That was close. The woman exhaled sharply and leaned against the control panel. That was reckless. She turned to him. "Do you even understand what you've done? The Empire will never stop hunting you now." Ethan ran a hand through his messy brown hair. "Yeah, I'm starting to get that." The woman studied him for another moment, then sighed. "You need to learn how to fight." Ethan blinked. "Excuse me. You're carrying one of the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy, and you don't even know how to swing it properly. If you want to survive, you'll need training." Ethan hesitated. He wasn't a fighter. He never had been. But deep down, he knew this wasn't about what he wanted. It was about what the galaxy needed. The sword had chosen him. That meant something. He took a deep breath. "All right. Teach me." The woman smirked. "Good." She extended a hand. "I'm Silara, the last of the Zitharians." Ethan shook her hand. Ethan Carter, the most confused human in the galaxy. Silara chuckled. "Come on. Training starts now." The training begins. Silara led Ethan to the ship's training room, a spacious metal chamber with gravity controls and simulated battle drones. She tossed him a wooden replica of the Blade of Zithar. "First lesson, don't get yourself killed." Ethan frowned. "That's a terrible lesson." Silara smirked. "You'll see." She activated a control panel. Instantly, 3 combat drones emerged from the walls. Their glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan. Then they attacked. Ethan barely had time to react. The first drone lunged with a blunt training weapon, swinging hard toward his ribs. He yelped and stumbled back, the strike barely missing him. Silara sighed. "Pathetic." Ethan glared at her. "I wasn't ready." "You think the Empire will wait until you're ready." Ethan gritted his teeth. The second drone struck. He raised the wooden blade, blocking the attack at the last second. The impact vibrated up his arms. The sword was heavy. He wasn't used to this, but the moment the thought crossed his mind, a strange feeling took over. His grip adjusted, his stance shifted. The Blade of Zithar wasn't just choosing him, it was guiding him. The third drone lunged. Ethan spun his body, moving with a grace that wasn't his own. His blade arced through the air, crack, striking the drone's head clean off. The room fell silent. The last drone collapsed, sparking. Silara stared at him. Ethan panted, his heart racing. I don't know how I did that." Silara folded her arms. "You're learning." But before Ethan could celebrate, the ship's alarm blared again. Silara's face darkened. "We're being tracked." Ethan's stomach sank. Already. Silara turned to the control panel. "They placed a beacon on us before we jumped. They know where we are." The ship's ad voice rang through the speakers. "Warning. Incoming warship. Estimated arrival. 30 seconds. Ethan gripped the sword tightly. "We don't have time to run, do we?" Silara shook her head. "No. This time, we fight." Ethan took a deep breath, his fingers tightening around the hilt of the Blade of Zithar. He wasn't a warrior, but he would have to become one. Because the war was just beginning. Training of the Chosen One. The ship trembled under the weight of the incoming enemy vessel. Warning sirens echoed through the corridors, flashing red lights painting the walls in an eerie glow. Ethan Carter stood frozen, gripping the Blade of Zithar in his hands, his pulse hammering in his ears. This was real. This wasn't another training session. It wasn't just an escape anymore. The Empire was here. Across from him, Solara, the last of the Zitharians, moved with cold efficiency. Her fingers danced over the ship's control panel, her silver eyes locked onto the incoming warship. Ethan could see the hard lines of her face. Calm, determined, prepared. He was none of those things. Solara didn't turn as she spoke. "Listen to me, human. You've been chosen by the sword. That means you have one option: fight or die." Ethan swallowed hard. "What about running?" Solara gave a humorless chuckle. "No time." She pointed at the holographic display. A massive Imperial dreadship loomed over them, its long black hull casting a shadow across the stars. A mechanical voice rang through the speakers. "Attention, unidentified vessel. This is Admiral Ryloth of the Galactic Empire. You are harboring a fugitive and an object of great importance. Surrender now, or be destroyed." Ethan winced. "That sounds bad." Solara turned to him, her expression sharp. "No. What's bad is that they're giving us a choice. It means they have something worse planned if we surrender." Ethan tightened his grip on the sword. The blade hummed softly, as if whispering to him. It was alive. It had chosen him. Now he had to prove himself worthy of it. Solara moved toward the ship's weapons locker, yanking it open. She tossed Ethan a small energy shield, a thin, circular device. "Take this. It'll keep you alive for a few extra seconds." Ethan fumbled with it. "That's not very comforting." She grabbed her own weapon, a sleek Zitharian pulse rifle, its design elegant and deadly. "We'll board their ship before they can board ours. It's the only way to survive." Ethan's stomach flipped. "You want to go toward them?" Solara smirked. "That's how you win a fight." Before Ethan could argue, the ship lurched violently. The Empire's tractor beam had locked on. Time was up. A desperate plan. Solara acted first, slamming the controls and setting the ship on a collision course with the dreadship's lower docking bay. Ethan's eyes widened. "Wait, what are you doing?" "Buying us an opening." The ship's thrusters roared, fighting against the tractor beam's pull. The Imperial warship tried to hold them in place, but Solara's maneuver forced a hard angle, dragging the smaller vessel toward a weaker docking port. The Empire had expected compliance. They weren't expecting a direct attack. Solara grabbed Ethan's arm. "Move." They raced toward the airlock, just as the ship collided with the enemy hangar. The impact tore through metal, sending a shockwave across the docking bay. Soldiers scrambled, caught off guard. The hatch blew open. Solara leaped through first, landing with perfect precision. Ethan followed, barely keeping his balance. The Imperial guards recovered fast. Open fire. Blaster bolts filled the air. Ethan's instincts took over. His body moved before his mind could react. The blade of Zithar flashed, deflecting shots with unnatural accuracy. He twisted, turning with fluid motion, as if he had trained for years. But he hadn't. It was the sword. The energy shield on his wrist flickered to life, absorbing a blast that would have killed him instantly. Solara was a blur of motion, dodging, weaving, firing back with lethal efficiency. The Zitharian warrior was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Every movement was calculated, precise. But there were too many soldiers. They had to keep moving. Down the corridor, Solara shouted. Ethan followed, barely keeping up. They ran through the narrow metallic halls of the warship, alarms blaring all around them. Soldiers poured in from all sides. Solara ducked into a side door, dragging Ethan with her. The doors sealed shut behind them. For a brief moment, silence. Ethan panted, his chest burning. He leaned against the wall. That was insane. Solara smirked. That was just the entry. Ethan groaned. Oh, great. But before he could say more, Solara moved to a holographic control panel on the wall. She pressed a few keys, scanning the ship's systems. She frowned. Problem? Ethan asked. Solara's face darkened. They'd locked the bridge. No way to take control of the ship from here. Ethan's stomach sank. So, what now? Silara turned to him, her silver eyes serious. Now, you use the sword. Ethan froze. Use it for what? The blade of Zithar wasn't just made for war, she said. It was made to unlock things. Ethan frowned. Unlock what? Silara pointed to a sealed blast door at the end of the hallway. That. Ethan hesitated. The sword hummed in his hand, like it was waiting for him. Slowly, he stepped forward, raising the blade. As he approached the blast door, golden energy flared from the sword's surface, crackling like lightning. The ancient markings on the blade glowed brighter. Then, without warning, the sword sliced through the air, and the massive steel door split apart like paper. Beyond it was the Imperial Command Center, and standing in the middle of it, waiting for them, was General Xylar. Ethan's heart stopped. The reptilian warrior stood tall, his crimson armor gleaming under the artificial lights. He was calm, unshaken, as if he had been expecting them. His yellow eyes locked onto Ethan's sword. You should not have come here, human, Xylar growled. That blade does not belong to you. Ethan's grip tightened. Yeah, it disagrees. Xylar's lips curled into a sharp grin. Then let's see if you're worthy of keeping it. With inhuman speed, the general lunged forward. Ethan barely had time to react before the real fight began. The Battle of the Worthy. The air inside the Imperial Command Center was thick with tension. Ethan Carter stood his ground, gripping the blade of Zithar. The sword pulsed with energy in his hands, its golden markings glowing brighter as if preparing for battle. Across from him, General Xylar, the ruthless Drakvar warrior, rolled his shoulders, his reptilian eyes locked onto Ethan. The moment was silent. Then, Xylar moved. He was fast, too fast. 1 second he was standing still. The next, he was a blur of motion, closing the distance with inhuman speed. His clawed hand slashed through the air, aiming to rip out Ethan's throat. Ethan barely had time to react. The blade of Zithar moved on its own, pulling his body into a defensive stance. The ancient weapon clashed against Xylar's strike with a burst of energy, sending a shockwave through the room. Ethan stumbled back, his arms shaking from the impact. Xylar tilted his head. The sword fights for you, he sneered. But you are still weak. Ethan clenched his jaw. He knew that. He wasn't a trained warrior. He wasn't like Silara. He wasn't like Xylar. But the sword had chosen him, and that meant something. Xylar lunged again, this time drawing his own weapon, a curved plasma blade, glowing red-hot. He swung hard, the energy blade slicing toward Ethan's chest. Clang! Ethan barely blocked in time. Sparks erupted as the two weapons collided. Xylar pressed down, his inhuman strength overwhelming Ethan. You are a fool, Xylar growled. The Empire does not fear you. The galaxy does not need you. Ethan gritted his teeth. Yeah, we'll see about that. With a burst of effort, Ethan shoved Xylar back. He swung the blade of Zithar in a sweeping arc, golden energy streaking through the air like a comet. Xylar dodged at the last second, but the edge of the energy wave grazed his armor, cutting a deep gash across his chest plate. For the first time, the general staggered. Ethan saw the flicker of shock in Xylar's eyes, just for a second. Then it was gone. Xylar straightened, his clawed fingers twitching with rage. His eyes burned with fury. You dare wound me? Ethan took a deep breath, sweat dripping down his face. He could feel the blade of Zithar's power growing. It wasn't just a weapon, it was responding to him, amplifying his abilities. But could he really win this fight? Before he could dwell on that thought, Xylar roared, and the battle truly began. The fight for survival. Xylar came at Ethan with unrelenting speed, his plasma blade a blur of deadly red arcs. Ethan had no time to think. He had to react. His body moved instinctively, dodging, parrying, countering. The blade of Zithar guided him, its golden light clashing against Sylar's red-hot blade. The battle tore through the command center, sparks flying as their weapons sliced through metal walls and consoles. The room shook as stray attacks shattered equipment and sent debris flying. Sylara, who had been fighting off the remaining Imperial guards, paused to watch. She had never seen anyone fight like this before. It wasn't skill. It wasn't training. It was the sword. But even with the sword's power, Ethan was struggling. Sylar was stronger, faster. Ethan barely dodged a strike aimed at his chest. His arms were tiring, his breaths coming in sharp gasps. The general could sense it. "You can't win," Sylar growled, his blade inches from Ethan's neck. "Surrender the sword. Kneel, and I may let you live." Ethan's grip tightened. Something deep inside him refused to give up. He wasn't just fighting for himself. He was fighting for Sylara, for the Zitharians who had been wiped out, for every species that suffered under the Empire's rule. And suddenly, the blade of Zithar pulsed. A shockwave of golden light erupted from the sword, forcing Sylar back. Ethan's mind exploded with visions. He saw the past, the last Zitharian warrior, wielding the blade of Zithar in a desperate battle against the Empire's first invasion. He saw the present, himself, standing in this very room, facing Sylar, history repeating itself. And he saw the future, the Empire falling, its grip over the galaxy broken. A voice echoed in his mind, the sword's voice. "Finish this." Ethan's body moved on its own. With blinding speed, he charged. Sylar's eyes widened. He hadn't expected the attack. Ethan slashed. The blade of Zithar cut through Sylar's plasma sword, shattering it instantly. Sylar had just enough time to gasp before Ethan's final strikes sliced across his chest. The Drakvar general staggered back, blood dripping from the deep wound. Ethan held the sword steady, breathing hard. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, Sylar collapsed. The once mighty general lay on the floor, his golden eyes dimming. He let out a ragged breath, staring at Ethan. "You are not just a human," he muttered. "You are something more." Ethan didn't answer. He lowered the sword, his body exhausted. Sylara stepped forward, standing beside him. She looked down at Sylar, then at Ethan. "You did it," she said. Ethan exhaled. "Yeah, I guess I did." The beginning of the end. The Empire's fleet was still out there. Sylar was defeated, but the war wasn't over. Sylara turned to Ethan. "We need to move. The rest of the fleet will be here soon." Ethan nodded. He didn't have time to process what had just happened. They ran toward the command center's main control panel, where Sylara quickly hacked into the ship's navigation systems. Her eyes lit up as she found something. "There's a hidden file in the Empire's database," she said. "It's a location. The coordinates lead to." She froze. Ethan frowned. "What? What is it?" Sylara slowly turned to him. "The lost Zitharian homeworld." Ethan's breath caught in his throat. The place where the blade of Zithar had been forged. The place where the war had begun. And maybe, the place where it could finally end. Ethan tightened his grip on the sword. "Then that's where we go next." Sylara nodded. "Let's finish this." As the ship powered up, preparing to jump into hyperspace, Ethan took one last look at Sylar's fallen form. The Empire wasn't invincible. He had just proven that. Now, it was time to end their rule for good. The secret of the Zithar blade. The ship shuddered violently as it tore through hyperspace. Stars stretched into glowing lines outside the viewport, and the hum of the engines vibrated through the floor beneath Ethan Carter's boots. He gripped the blade of Zithar tightly, staring at the coordinates flickering on the ship's navigation screen. They were headed to the Zitharian homeworld, a world that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. Beside him, Sylara, the last known Zitharian warrior, leaned against the control panel, her silver eyes locked on the same coordinates. Her fingers twitched slightly against the console, her usual confidence tinged with something Ethan hadn't seen in her before. Uncertainty. Ethan exhaled. "You okay?" Solara's jaw tightened. "I never thought I'd see it again." Ethan frowned. "But you said your world was destroyed." It was. Her voice was sharp, but not angry. She took a breath, steadying herself. "The Empire wiped out my people, turned our planet into dust. But these coordinates, they lead somewhere deep in uncharted space." Ethan hesitated. "Then what do you think we'll find?" Solara shook her head. "I don't know." The ship's AI chimed in, its mechanical voice breaking the silence. "Arriving at destination in 60 seconds. Ethan gripped the controls as the ship began to slow, the blue streaks of hyperspace fading into normal space. Then he saw it. A planet, floating alone in the black abyss. It was massive, larger than any world Ethan had ever seen. But it wasn't just big. It was wrong. The entire planet was covered in shimmering golden energy, almost like a shield. The atmosphere swirled with violent storms, dark clouds flashing with strange red lightning. But through the storm, Ethan caught glimpses of something beneath. Ruins. The broken remains of massive cities. Ancient towers stretching toward the sky, half buried in the dust of time. It wasn't just a planet. It was a graveyard. Solara's breath caught. "It's real." Ethan stared at the ruins, his mind racing. This place, it wasn't just any world. It was something ancient, something powerful. Then, the blade of Zithar started to glow. The hum of the sword grew louder, vibrating in his hands. The golden symbols along its surface shimmered brighter, pulsing in a slow, steady rhythm. Ethan felt a pull, a deep, unnatural pull inside his chest, like the sword was calling to something. Solara saw it too. "It's reacting." Ethan swallowed. "Yeah, but to what?" The ship's AI interrupted them again. "Warning. Anomalous energy detected. Extreme gravitational field ahead." Before Ethan could react, the ship lurched forward. The engines whined as something yanked them toward the planet, a force stronger than anything he had ever felt. They were being pulled in. Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. He grabbed the controls, trying to break free, but it was useless. Solara cursed, slamming buttons on the console. "It's pulling us in too fast." Ethan gritted his teeth, braced for impact. The ship plunged toward the surface, and the world went white. The cradle of the ancients. Ethan woke up to the sound of wind howling. His head throbbed. His body ached. He blinked, struggling to clear his vision. His hand still clenched the blade of Zithar, its golden light flickering weakly. The ship had crashed. He sat up slowly, glancing around. The cockpit was shattered, glass and debris scattered across the metallic floor. Sparks flickered from broken panels. The ship's AI silent. Ethan groaned. "Solara." A muffled cough came from behind him. He turned to see Solara pushing herself up, wiping the streak of blood from her forehead. "I'm alive," she muttered. "Barely." Ethan exhaled in relief. He reached down to help her up, his legs still unsteady. Then he saw where they had landed. The ship rested at the edge of a massive ruin. A city lost to time, its once grand towers now crumbled into dust. The ground was cracked and scorched, the sky above them filled with swirling golden energy. And in the distance, a temple. Unlike the rest of the ruins, this structure was still intact. A massive ziggurat, towering above everything else, its entrance framed by two enormous statues of Zitharian warriors. And at the center of the entrance, a door covered in the same golden symbols as the blade of Zithar. Solara stared at it, her voice almost a whisper. "This is it." Ethan's grip on the sword tightened. The blade had led them here. But why? They stepped forward, moving through the ruins. The air was heavy, charged with something unseen, something ancient. Every step Ethan took, he felt the energy growing stronger. Solara glanced at him. "Do you feel that?" Ethan nodded. Yeah, and I don't like it. They reached the temple doors. The symbols glowed brighter, pulsing in time with the blade. Ethan raised the sword. The moment the blade touched the door, boom! A blast of golden light erupted from the symbols, throwing them back. Ethan hit the ground hard, gasping for air. The doors began to move. Ancient stone grinded against metal, dust spilling from the cracks as the entrance slowly opened. And beyond the threshold stood a figure. Ethan's breath caught. The figure was tall, draped in flowing robes of golden energy, their face hidden beneath an ornate mask. Their hands crackled with raw power, their presence overwhelming. Selara's eyes widened in shock. No way, she whispered. Ethan barely found his voice. Who is that? The figure stepped forward, their voice deep, echoing like 1,000 whispers at once. You have come far, chosen one. Ethan's heart pounded. This wasn't a ghost. This wasn't a memory. This was a living Zitharian. The last one. Before Ethan could react, the figure raised their hand. A golden shockwave blasted outward, and the world went dark. The last stand of humanity. The world around Ethan Carter vanished into darkness. He didn't fall. He didn't float. It was as if he existed in a space where time itself had stopped. His breath caught in his throat, his fingers still wrapped tightly around the blade of Zithar. The golden markings on the sword glowed softly, flickering in the void. Then, a voice. You are not ready. The deep, layered voice echoed from all directions. Ethan turned sharply, but there was no one there. Then, suddenly, light. The void shattered like glass, and Ethan found himself somewhere else. A battlefield. But not just any battlefield. This was the past. The sky above was cracked with fire, the ground littered with the fallen bodies of Zitharian warriors. The air reeked of smoke and blood. Giant war machines, shaped like black metal serpents, slithered across the land, spewing destruction in every direction. At the center of it all, a lone Zitharian warrior, draped in golden robes, wielding the blade of Zithar. Ethan's breath caught in his throat. This wasn't just any Zitharian. This was the first wielder of the blade. The warrior turned, their glowing silver eyes locking onto Ethan's. And then, without a word, they attacked. The trial of the blade. Ethan barely raised his sword in time. Golden steel met golden steel, and the clash rippled through time itself, sending a shockwave of energy across the battlefield. The Zitharian warrior pressed forward, their strength immense, their movements flawless. Ethan struggled to keep up. Every strike came faster, sharper, stronger. The warrior moved like lightning, the blade of Zithar, an extension of their very soul. Ethan wasn't just fighting an enemy. He was fighting the sword's true master. Sweat dripped down his face. His arms burned with exhaustion. The warrior wasn't trying to kill him. They were testing him. Prove yourself, human. Ethan gritted his teeth. He had come too far to fail now. With everything he had left, he pushed back. His body stopped fighting against the sword and started fighting with it. The golden energy around the blade flared brighter, and suddenly, he wasn't just defending. He was attacking. He dodged the next strike with ease. He countered with perfect precision. His movements became effortless, as if the knowledge of all past warriors was flowing through him. And then, with one final strike, Ethan's blade cut through the illusion. The truth of the blade. The battlefield crumbled away, replaced by reality. Ethan stood back in the temple ruins, panting, the golden-robed figure before him untouched. The figure nodded. You are not Zitharian, they said, but you are worthy. Ethan staggered, trying to catch his breath. That was a test. The figure studied him. The blade of Zithar does not choose warriors by strength alone. It seeks those who fight for something greater than themselves. Ethan swallowed. And what am I fighting for? The figure tilted their head. You do not know yet. Then the ground trembled. Ethan turned sharply. Silara stood at the entrance, her pulse rifle drawn, her eyes wide with warning. They found us. A low, distant rumble shook the temple. Outside, the sky flashed with red light. Ethan rushed forward, stepping past the glowing warrior, and looked up. His stomach dropped. The Imperial fleet had arrived. Dozens of warships loomed above the ruined planet, their massive cannons locking onto the temple. At the front of the formation, standing aboard the lead battleship, was Admiral Ryloff, the cold, calculating leader of the Imperial forces. A voice rang out across the battlefield. "Surrender the sword, or we will wipe this planet from existence. The final battle begins." Silara turned to Ethan. "We can't fight them alone." Ethan stared at the fleet, his mind racing. No, they couldn't fight them alone. But they weren't alone. He turned back to the golden-robed figure. "You said I'm worthy." The figure nodded. Ethan took a deep breath. "Then help me." For a long moment, silence. Then the figure raised their hands, and the planet woke up. The ruins rumbled. The shattered cities began to glow with golden light, and all around them, figures began to rise. Not ghosts, not illusions, but warriors. Cytherian warriors. Hundreds, thousands. Emerging from the ruins, their bodies wrapped in ancient golden energy, their weapons blazing with power. Silara gasped. "By the stars." Ethan turned back to the Imperial fleet. "You wanted a war," he muttered. He raised the blade of Zithar high. "Then come and get it." The last stand. The first Imperial warships opened fire. Golden shields erupted around the planet, deflecting the blasts. Zitharian warriors took to the skies, energy blades in hand, launching themselves toward the incoming ships. Silara charged into battle, her rifle blazing, fighting alongside her long-lost people. Ethan felt the sword guide him. He wasn't just a human anymore. He was part of something greater. He leaped forward, the blade of Zithar shining like a burning sun. And for the first time in centuries, the Empire was afraid. The end of the war. The battle lasted for hours. The Imperial fleet crumbled under the combined might of the Zitharians. One by one, the massive warships fell from the sky, their wreckage burning across the ruined cities. Ethan fought with everything he had, every swing of the blade sending shockwaves through the battlefield. And finally, the last Imperial warship fell. The sky was clear. The battle was over. Ethan stood at the edge of the ruined temple, gasping for breath, the blade of Zithar still glowing faintly in his hands. Silara walked up beside him, her face streaked with dust and victory. "You did it." Ethan shook his head. "We did it." He turned, looking at the last Zitharian guardian, the being that had tested him. "What happens now?" Ethan asked. The figure studied him. "The war is over, but your journey is not." Ethan exhaled, looking at the sky, watching the remains of the Empire's fleet drift into the void. The galaxy had changed, but there was still so much more to do. And Ethan Carter, the human who was never meant to wield the blade of Zithar, was just getting started. The legend begins. The sword had found its champion. The Empire had fallen. But the real fight, the fight for the future, had only begun. Ethan tightened his grip on the blade of Zithar, a small smile tugging at his lips. It was time to see what else destiny had in store.